Africa's voices.
A way of understanding the world.
A door to the soul.
In Africa.
In Africa.
In Africa.
CNN African Voices.
I'm Frederick Chikoti, a writer from Malawi. Hear my story.
African Voices. Tonight on CNN.
Over the years, I've had the privilege and the opportunity not just to anchor, but also report on the news, and I still do it. Hala Garani, CNN. And therefore, I take everything I learn in the field to the studio. It is important. You can't just do one thing or the other. You really have to have that global perspective, but also that ground level perspective. This is just a completely surreal experience. When you speak to a newsmaker on a satellite feed, that has value. Sure it does. But if you speak to the 14-year-old refugee girl who can barely afford her school books, that has just as much value. And that's what's important about this program. We bring you the news through the eyes, through the opinions, through the vantage points of everyone who's a part of the story. That is the world right now.
The World Right Now with Hala Garani. Weekdays on CNN.
On the road, you've explored some of the world's most incredible places. Where will we go next?
Let me push you once more on this, because this is important. The world should expect to see a ground offensive at any time. How long will Israel wait?
Until we shall reach, or the moment we shall reach a conclusion that this should be the next step. It may happen quite soon. I wish that the amount of blood will go down and the tears will be tears of happiness, not tears of regret and sorrow.
A fight for the soul of Hong Kong.
There is tension between the mainlanders and between Hong Kongers. What's fueling that?
Competition, but also the dislike of the system.
How far will Beijing let Hong Kong go?
I expect a high degree of freedom in Hong Kong, but I don't expect it to be infinite.
I'm Christy Lustad in Hong Kong with a look at the territory's identity and its complicated relationship with Beijing.
On China, Saturday on CNN.
I'm Anderson Cooper. This is CNN.
The world may be in crisis, but the American economy has been steadily recovering. The unemployment rate, consumer confidence, and new home sales are all better than they've been since 2008. And the stock market keeps hitting record highs. On the other side, the unemployment rate is skewed because there are so many people who have simply given up looking for jobs, and therefore they aren't counted as the unemployed, and wages just aren't rising for most Americans. What to make of all this? Joining me now is Paul Krugman, the New York Times columnist and Nobel Prize-winning economist. So Paul, the quick take on the U.S. economy.
Things are getting better, finally. It's starting to look finally like a real recovery, but it's not a boom. And this is after many, many years of terrible performance. So, relative to the way things have been for the last few years, we're feeling pretty good. Relative to anything anyone could have imagined, the worst downside you could have imagined 7 years ago, it's terrible. So it's, I would say it's half full, half empty, more half empty than half full, because we should be doing much better than this.
And lots of people argue the only reason we're doing as well as we are is that the Federal Reserve has maintained these extraordinary policies, very low rates, other kinds of programs that pump cash into the system.
Well, certainly keeping rates low. There is no there's no rational reason not to keep them low. Basically, business doesn't see a lot of investment opportunities. How people are not ready to buy houses in large numbers yet. So you have to have a cheap money environment, and at least thankfully, the Fed has been doing its job.
But a lot of people argue that what the Federal Reserve is doing has not produced that much in terms of a robust recovery by your own admission, but instead what it has done is fueled asset bubbles, very, very significant asset bubbles. So you have stock market prices going up, you have real estate, particularly at the high end, and that these, if you look back at periods similar to this, 98, 99, or 2007, 2006, 2007, they inevitably produce a collapse, some kind of the bubble will burst. And then that's terrible for unemployment as well. So this policy is sort of self-defeating.
There's two things to say. The first is, do you really want to say that the Fed should do something that we know would hurt the economy at a time when it's still very weak, on behalf of your judgment that there are bubbles out there? I mean, even those of us who warned about the housing bubble were not saying that the Fed should raise rates while the economy is weak. That's one hell of a judgment to make. Actually, let me give you a real example. In Sweden, the central bank looked, and they have something that looks much more like a real housing bubble than anything we have. They said, oh, that's got to take priority. Let's raise rates even though inflation is far below target. The result, after doing that for a while, is they've now slid into actual deflation while the bubble continues. And so they've reversed policy. They've cut rates again. So you're saying the Fed should follow that course? I don't think it makes sense.
You wrote this week, I think, that Obamacare is working. Explain very simply why you make that claim.
There were a bunch of things that Obamacare was supposed to do in its first year. It was supposed to sign up a lot of people through the exchanges, through the people buying essentially private insurance, but through the government-run exchanges. It was supposed to insure a bunch of additional people through Medicaid. It was supposed to do this without causing a spike in healthcare costs. It was supposed to substantially reduce the number of people who are uninsured. All of those things have happened. If you look at just about any of the numerical targets for the first year, it's done better than that. It's the most amazing thing that people don't know that. But after the big problems last fall, everyone was assuming that year one would come in short of expectations. In fact, it's come in ahead of expectations, and it looks very clear that this is a workable policy.
Healthcare costs, though, this is the part that everyone worries about. What is the evidence that healthcare costs are going down? Because you hear anecdotally that lots of people's premiums are going up, lots of companies say they're going up. What does the aggregate data show?
The aggregate data shows something which has got people pinching themselves, which healthcare costs are growing so slowly, it's really hard to believe. Medicare is currently spending about $1,000 less per beneficiary than what's projected just 4 years ago. So Medicare is way down. Its aggregate health expenditures is growing much more slowly. Premiums are rising, but premiums have risen every year forever. They don't seem to be rising. They seem, if anything, to be rising more slowly than before. The thing is, you're going to find, basically, if you're a healthy young male in a state that didn't have community ratings, so California, not New York, and you're affluent enough that you don't qualify for a subsidy, yeah, your premiums have gone up. You don't find a lot of the anti-Obamacare ad campaigns don't highlight people like that because they're not sufficiently sympathetic. They keep on trying to find middle-aged or older, middle-class people who've had big premium increases, but not one of those stories that's been highlighted in the ads has held up under scrutiny. So it turns out, yes, there are some losers, but it's a pretty narrow group, and the people that the program is supposed to help are being helped. The people who really need the care.
You've also written a little bit about energy, where you think that Obama has, broadly speaking, done more than many people realize.
Sure. So if you look at, there was a lot of energy investment in the stimulus. There's been a lot of move on standards for power plants. So Obama has, in fact, done not nearly enough. If you always, when it comes to climate issues, you look at the threat, and you look at the response, and they're so disproportionate that you can despair. But if you just compare what Obama has done with what has been done before, or with what people think he's done, it's a lot more. And we are kind of, this is not, we've had this kind of, in a way these are related. Health costs are growing much more slowly. than anyone expected. On energy, the cost of renewables has fallen much more than anyone expected, so that getting to a major reduction in greenhouse gas emissions looks much closer than anybody really thought was possible just a few years ago. And Obama is doing things that push us still closer to that point.
At the end of the day, what kind of grade would you give President Obama, particularly his domestic policy, which is what you write about?
Oh, wow. The question you have to ask is, are we grading what was achieved, or are we grading given the difficulty of the test, because there were, he has had to deal with a scorched earth opposition all the way. So I think if you look at the overall results, it's probably a B or a B minus, but a lot of that is not his fault. And if we look at how he's dealt with what he had to deal with, I think it's an A minus. There are things he could have done more: housing, mortgage relief. They're important. There are places where he didn't push when he should have. But in the end, look, this is the most consequential administration since Ronald Reagan. I don't like the consequences of Reagan, but America emerges from the Obama years a different country that emerges with something close to universal health care, emerges with a reasonably useful financial reform, and emerges with some important changes in energy and environmental policy. Not many presidents leave that behind. You know, America after Bill Clinton had not really been changed at all, and this is so in that sense, even though Clinton is a great political talent and Obama is not, in the end, Obama leaves behind a country that has been importantly changed, and I'd say for the better.
And of course, his critics would say for the worse.
Right, but changed anyway.
Paul Krugman, pleasure to have you on. Next on GPS, do you worry that your kids are playing too many video games? Well, so does a celebrated dictator. I'll explain when we come back.
Step into tomorrow's financial world and join CNN's Nina Dos Santos every month for Future Finance. Whether you're a global business or a global citizen.
We'll look at emerging trends to get perspective on what lies ahead and discuss what the next financial innovation is likely to be.
Future Finance, Wednesday on CNN.
Every year, we lose more species to illegal wildlife trade run by organized crime. Buying and selling protected wildlife products is a crime. Don't be part of it.
What is your reaction? This is a direct accusation. What does it feel like to be in this position? Is there something that you can say to the opposition? What was the historic animosity? What on earth do you hope to accomplish?
Amanpour, weekdays on CNN.
I'm Phil Black in Moscow, and this is CNN.
Let me push you once more on this because this is important. The world should expect to see a ground offensive at any time. How long will Israel wait?
Until we shall reach, or the moment we shall reach a conclusion that this should be the next step. It may happen quite soon. I wish that the amount of blood will go down and the tears will be tears of happiness, not tears of regret and sorrow.
I'm Salima Uras in New Delhi. This is CNN.
On July 20th, 1969, 45 years ago today, Apollo 11's Eagle landed on the moon, and Neil Armstrong became the first person to walk the lunar surface.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It brings me to my question of the week. Approximately how much more memory does Apple's iPhone 5S have compared with the Apollo guidance computer? A, 100,000 times more, B, 624,000 times more, C, 1.8 million times more, or D, 5.4 million times more? Stay tuned and we will tell you the correct answer. This week's book of the week is William Bowen's Higher Education in the Digital Age. One of the few places where the information revolution has not improved productivity or reduced costs is higher education. But that is all about to change with the rise of online learning. The former president of Princeton explains how education will and should change in the face of these huge technological winds. Conversational in tone and full of wisdom, this is a great book. And now for the last look. To add to the world's tumult, the North Korean government threatened military action last month over an upcoming Seth Rogen and James Franco movie. It's about television personalities recruited to assassinate Kim Jong-un during an interview.
You want to go kill Kim Jong-un?
Totally, I'd love to assassinate Kim Jong-un. It's a date.
Recently, Pyongyang wrote a letter of complaint requesting that the movie, which they deemed to be an act of war, be shut down. While this seems in keeping with Kim Jong-un's usual antics, he isn't the only dictator to throw this kind of tantrum. Remember Manuel Noriega, the former Panamanian strongman? He's suing the makers of the video game Call of Duty, Black Ops 2, from his Panamanian prison cell. Noriega alleges in his lawsuit that the game portrays him as a kidnapper, murderer, and enemy of the state. Perhaps the video game designers should have had his character stick to drug trafficking, racketeering, and money laundering, crimes he was convicted of in the United States and France. Oh, and he was also convicted of murder in Panama. One would think Kim Jong-un has more important things to worry about than Hollywood comedies. I guess Noriega, in his prison cell, has more time on his hands. The correct answer to our GPS challenge question was C, approximately 1.8 million. Apollo's guidance computer had a memory of just 36 kilobytes. The Apple iPhone 5S has a memory of 64 million kilobytes. Weighing in at 70 pounds, the guidance computer was a marvel of innovation in its day, helping command the nearly 240,000-mile journey from Cape Kennedy, Florida, to the surface of the moon. But it couldn't do what an iPhone can do. Thanks to all of you for being part of my program this week. I will see you next week.
Good morning and welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Jim Sciutto in Washington. Thank you for joining us for this special coverage of the downing of Flight 17. Reliable Sources has been preempted today, but Brian Stelter will join us later in the hour, and he's talking to Sarah Firth. She is a Russian television reporter who resigned over how her network is covering the deadly crash in Ukraine, saying, quote, "We're lying every single day and finding sexier ways